Welcome back, everybody. So let's do a little bit of a news of the day video, and things get kind of dramatic, and we're into week 2 of the season, so it makes sense. Things are getting kind of dramatic. Joe Thornton's out for 4 weeks with a rib fracture for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So the good news is that while Thornton's been a really good story for Toronto, I think you can plug somebody else in on that line. Hyman can come up play on that line. I don't think it's crippling. But on that note, Matthews is out tonight. So we don't know. Matthews is likely day to day, but losing Matthews and Thornton, that does hurt. And Thornton's leadership has been praised already in Toronto, rightfully so. And so they do lose something with him out of the lineup, for sure. But it's not something that they're not able to replace from an offensive perspective. The leadership can't be, but we'll see how the Leafs do now that the injury bug's gonna hit a lot of teams. We're seeing a lot of games over a very short period of time. Makes sense. Speaking of injury bugs, as Dallas's start to the season's been pushed back, Klingberg's apparently playing tonight for Dallas. So Klingberg was doubtful to start the season when it was going to start in December and when it was going to start early January. And then when it did start, it was kind of like, well, we don't know if he's going to be ready for Dallas. And then COVID. And now apparently he's good to go tonight. So there you go. And honestly, it's a huge difference maker whether or not he plays. Because it's going to be Heiskanen, it's going to be Klingberg. They're going to be exchanging guys. And that means that Dallas finally plays, and finally all 31 teams will actually have games. I thought it was interesting, too, that the NHL website did their Power 16, which is their power rankings. And they still have Dallas in the top 16. And that's why I didn't do a power rankings last week, on top of the fact that it was way too early. It still kind of is, but we're still doing it on tomorrow night. But honestly, I don't know how you power rank a team that hasn't even played yet. Because again, every year is different, and there's already been some surprises this year. So the idea of having Dallas in the top 16 when they haven't played a game yet, it's odd. But we'll see how they do. We'll see how things go for them tonight. It's going to be a very busy season for them. Speaking of busy, the Columbus Blue Jackets phone is likely very busy right now. So Pierre LeBrun is reporting on teams that have inquired about Dubois, and any team that he left off the list, their fan base is like, why isn't our team calling? Look, Pierre-Luc Dubois is a young center who's off to a rough start for Columbus. And a lot is being made about his effort last night. I'll say this. I don't think he likes playing for Tortorella right now. I don't think he wants to be in Columbus. Here's the problem. Here's the problem I have with it. There are plenty of players who have played for coaches they don't like. There are plenty of players who've played in cities they don't like playing in. And they've played well. And you find out later, I hated the coach. I hated playing for him. Scotty Bowman's a good example. We talk a lot about Scotty Bowman being like the greatest coach of all time. There were plenty of players who hated Scotty Bowman, but he won. And because they knew that he was a winner, and because things were different back then, nobody really said much of anything. And I'm talking about like back in the Montreal days. And so the idea that, if a player, my point is this, if Dubois is going to be a player who's not making the effort on the ice because he's not happy about the coach he's playing for, that has to be a warning to a team looking to pick him up. Because what's to say he won't go into a funk on your team, maybe not today or tomorrow or in a month, but maybe next season. He gets off to a slow start and he decides to get kind of, I don't know if I want to play here. And as odd as that is, there are players that have done that throughout their careers. It is not as common, at least I don't think it's as common in hockey as you might see it in, say, football. Football's very common. Football players be like, okay, so he wants out again. And so for Dubois, I think that drives his value down. I think the way he's playing right now drives his value down, because if I'm a general manager and I'm picking up that $5 million contract that's only for 2 years, meaning I have to sit down and negotiate with him as soon as this coming August, I'm going to have some doubts as to whether or not I want to give up key assets from my team. And a team may very well do it. But I think Dubois is hurting his value. I think that Columbus, the longer this drags out, the more it's going to drag his value down. And here's the thing, if they don't make this trade soon, and he continues to play this way, and now there's rumors that he may be a healthy scratch for their next game. If this keeps going down this road, his value only goes down, and then Columbus, the smartest move would be not to trade him until the offseason. Just say, you know what, we'll wait till the offseason, teams will have more salary cap space, and then we can get more back. Which means that if you perceive that Dubois is the key player for them up front, and down the middle he should be, that has a huge impact on their ability to make the playoffs and maybe their ability to do anything if they get there. Columbus is in an interesting position because this is the first time they've had prolonged success. Being in the playoffs for more than 2 years in a row, that's considered success for Columbus. And it's incremental improvements. How they handle this could be the deciding factor as to whether or not they keep making those improvements, or we see them go back to kind of being an also-ran. Which with a 1-2-2 start, they're in danger of getting there. And I don't get the feeling that Jarmo has any interest in moving on from Tortorella. I don't get the feeling that Tortorella wants to leave. But if you end up in his doghouse, you can easily end up in a doghouse for another coach. That is absolutely possible. So hopefully the entire thing with Dubois and the Blue Jackets plays itself out over the next, I'll say, couple of weeks. Hopefully it doesn't take much longer than that. So it doesn't look like Tyler Myers is going to receive any kind of punishment from the league, which means that on Saturday against Montreal, I would expect he has to drop the gloves. I'm surprised. And it's one of those hits that if it's not suspendable, again, it comes back to, does the NHL need to revisit what is and isn't suspendable, where players might get suspended and get fines for plays that don't look as bad as the ones that don't result in some kind of a fine or suspension, because Armia is out with a concussion. And according to Claude Julien, it's indefinite because it's a concussion. So it's horrible for Montreal because he was off to a great start, had 4 points last night, and Myers takes him out. And at least from what I can see, the NHL's not doling out any kind of punishment. I know Elliot Friedman is stating that, by NHL standards, it's not a suspension. He didn't see a suspension coming either. I don't know. It's just that the situation of the game and just the angle, everything about that hit just looks wrong. And again, we've had this discussion every year. I'm kind of surprised that the fact that there's an injury, plus Myers has been talked to by NHL player safety before, that those two things combined haven't led to anything to do with a hearing. And yet normally if there's going to be a hearing or a suspension, we've already had at least a notice from NHL player safety that somebody's due to have a hearing. And there hasn't been anything yet today. Doesn't mean there won't be, but it doesn't look like there will be. So, yeah, Myers would still be in the Canucks lineup, which may be more of a detractor than anything else, because Montreal's going to key on him. Based on what happened in that game, Montreal, they'll key on him. I would look for Sherratt to drop the gloves with him pretty early in that game. And I'm not sure if one fight would necessarily do it. But again, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Keep in mind they're playing each other 9 times this year. They've only got through 2 games. So, yeah. And I actually thought about wearing a Montreal jersey for this video, just as a way of saying, look, I agree that if Myers doesn't get any kind of punishment for that, I don't think that's right. Even if it's by the rule book, we know that there's certain rules that have been changed before, and head hits are something that we didn't used to think anything of, and now they result in suspensions. And in this case, it was 5, and he's out of the game. And yeah, here we are. And when I say out of the game, I mean there was 2 minutes left. So it's not like in the first period he got thrown out for the rest of the game. So you can argue, well, he missed over 2 periods of hockey. No, he missed 2 minutes of hockey in a game that was already 6-3. So, all right. I swear at this point, Jim Rutherford's trolling the fan base in Pittsburgh. Apparently they're seeking a third pairing defenseman with Matheson hurt and Patterson out. And so now they're seeking a third pairing defenseman. Okay. Pierre-Olivier Joseph is apparently set to debut tonight. That's the likelihood anyways for Pittsburgh. He's been called up from the taxi squad. So we're a week and a half into the season, and apparently Pittsburgh's looking for more depth on the blue line. Because, of course, they are. If you're keeping track of the cap, they have $1.9 million in cap space with which they can maybe fix something. Would you like Myers? I swear he's only 1.9 million, and no takebacks. And I'm just kidding, kind of, sort of. Myers. The sad part is Myers has had some good games this year, and after that rough start against Minnesota in the playoffs in 2020, he did get it together and he did play a lot better. But it's just when it's bad with Myers, it just feels like it's bad, and he's expensive. So those two things combined, and I think that's part of it too, is that he'll get more criticism because they're paying him $6 million a year rather than if they were paying him $3.5. I think the amount of criticism thrown his way and Benning's way would be a lot different if he was making $3.5 million instead of $6 million. But anyways, we'll see how Pittsburgh does in their search for defensemen. I would imagine they'll find some defensemen that are available that might be third pairing. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Maybe Dubois ends up in Pittsburgh and they have some massive deal worked out there. It's unlikely, but you just never know, right? Now, a question that we may all have. So we've seen a bunch of games getting moved and postponed and all this. And of course, the schedule is a limited amount of time. And they've been clear they're not going past July 9th as the latest that the Stanley Cup can be awarded. So if we see a situation where, well, we're not able to get 56 games in for certain teams, we would then go to the same situation we had last year to decide playoff spots, which is winning percentage. Now, based on that, it could potentially cause a situation where fans are upset that their team missed the playoffs and they had 2 games against Colorado, whereas the other team didn't have those 2 games against Colorado, and instead they had 2 games against Anaheim, and so they ended up with a better winning percentage because they had a lighter schedule by that couple of games. And it happens. It does. Where they'll look and say, oh, well, which games did they lose? Well, that's not fair. So we'll see what happens, but apparently if we end up in a situation where not all teams have played 56 games and games are canceled, okie dokie, games are canceled, and we'll just go to a winning percentage to decide who makes the playoffs. So the idea of pushing it back, not in their best interests, apparently, and so there you go. We'll see what happens. And that's Pierre LeBrun's speculating that it could be points percentage. There's other scenarios too that are out there. Let's see what happens. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.